In every gram of paper money, there are over 200 million bacteria, and to reduce that, some people choose to launder money, and of course, money laundering is illegal. This is proof that the financial world is not only about stories of success and prosperity but also has a dark side. In today's video, we will explore one of those dark sides, money laundering. The stories below involve not only billions of dollars but also a host of international crime organizations, corrupt officials, and even large banks that seemed perfectly upright. We'll see how dirty money can be cunningly cleansed and analyze the serious consequences it brings to society. I'm Long, and this video has been researched and compiled from multiple sources. If there's any mistake or need for correction, please leave a comment below. Briefly, money laundering is the act of turning assets of illegal origin into legal ones. Assets here can mean cash, real estate, or any ownership rights and the benefits derived from those assets. For example, someone goes to Macau or Cambodia, wins a lot of money gambling. But that money is illicit. To spend it legitimately in the United States, they must launder it by selling goods, opening a company, then falsifying income, so the money automatically becomes clean. This behavior is not new. In fact, it appeared in China about 4,000 years ago when merchants traded and earned huge sums from smuggling or robbery. Naturally, they didn't want the king to know, so a new market emerged called the black market, where dirty money could be spent openly because everyone there dealt in dirty money. It's like being the normal one among criminals. Nowadays, there are many reasons to launder money, engaging in illegal activities such as smuggling, corruption, accepting bribes, manipulating the stock market, or simply not wanting to pay taxes on a massive sum even if the earnings are legal. Speaking of taxes, in developed countries, especially in Europe, tax rates are extremely high, particularly on wealth. Annual tax revenues in these countries account for around 30% of debt. In Denmark, with high social welfare, taxes can reach 50.9%, meaning if you earn 1 billion, you must pay over 500 million in taxes. That money funds public works, social benefits, and are the duties of every citizen, so remember to comply carefully. But when taxes are sky high like that, many people don't want to reveal their wealth, so they hide it by laundering money. Celebrities like Messi and other famous footballers earn so much that they seek to evade taxes because their tax bills are enormous, sometimes equal to a lifetime's earnings. I explain this only for context, so don't forget to pay your taxes. Another reason the wealthy launder money is to guard against divorce. What terrifies any wealthy husband is a wife seeking divorce. Many billionaires have divorced because for some wives, divorce is like a business deal or a life-changing opportunity. If a billionaire husband can't hide his assets, they will be hauled into court and split half to the ex-wife. That's unacceptable. Someone who makes immense amounts of money has a lot to lose, so billionaires always take precautions and continue seeking money laundering services. Over time, money laundering operations have become more widespread with advances in technology and especially cryptocurrency. Coupled with the rise of tax havens, laundering money has become even more sophisticated and harder to control. Speaking of tax havens, this term refers to countries or territories with extremely low or near zero corporate and personal income tax. That means if you open a company there, no matter how much profit you make, you pay almost no taxes. Examples include Switzerland and Panama. How did those governments sustain themselves? Still through taxes, but fixed ones whether in profit or loss. The authorities collect a set fee from companies. Another difference is that tax havens don't require companies to publish financial statements. Outsiders can't see a company's revenues or expenses. Most importantly, account holders aren't obligated to make their information public. In theory, tax havens optimize cash flow and drive development, but in practice, people exploit these benefits, creating a perfect environment for money laundering. To illustrate, I once heard a story about Asians living in Germany who struggled to buy property and could only rent, not because they lacked money, but because if they transferred large sums to the bank, all information about the sources of those funds, including personal income tax, would become public. Afraid of paying high taxes, they refused to declare and appeared to have dirty money, risking prosecution. If they tried to buy and were later caught evading taxes, their property would be seized. Both scenarios were too dangerous, so they stopped trying. How did they solve it? because they couldn't prove the funds were taxed and didn't want to reveal ownership. They used private trusts in tax havens. A trust is simply an asset management service. You transfer money there, and someone buys property or other assets on your behalf anywhere in the world, not just in Germany. Meanwhile, the media reported that in Sweden, gangs laundered money through Spotify by using proceeds from drug trafficking, theft, and fraud to pay for fake streams. Spotify then paid royalties to the artists who colluded with gangs to launder money. But to talk about the most shocking laundering scandal, we must discuss the Panama Papers. This event exposed the dark side of the super rich, implicating thousands of officials and celebrities. It began in 2016 when an investigative journalist was contacted by someone identifying as John Doe, promising encrypted documents about illicit activities, a data trove larger than anything seen before. A few months later, 11.5 million documents totaling 2.6 terabytes appeared in the journalist's inbox, overwhelming him. The files included names of over 214,000 offshore companies registered in Panama and the individuals and organizations behind them, emails, contracts, bank statements, and legal records. One person couldn't process all that data, so the best solution was to partner with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. After analysis, many high-profile names were revealed, including former Prime Minister David Cameron, whose father set up an offshore subsidiary to avoid taxes. David admitted that he and his wife had made shareholdings but sold them before he became Prime Minister in 2010. At a value of around £30,000, the revelation caused controversy and pressure, forcing Cameron to disclose personal finances and pledge stronger action against tax evasion. Another notable figure was Lionel Messi, whose father owned a Panamanian company as part of a complex network used to evade taxes. Both were investigated by Spanish authorities and convicted of tax fraud in 2016, receiving a 21-month suspended sentence and a €2 million fine. Iceland's prime minister and Argentina's former president were also implicated. The scheme involved a Panamanian law firm, Mossack Fonseca, founded to help politicians and officials hide assets. For 40 years, it served drug cartels, the mafia, and arms traffickers with 500 employees in 42 countries, covering nearly every tax haven, including Switzerland and the British Virgin Islands. Before the Panama Papers, few people knew it existed. To protect client identities, Mossack Fonseca created shell companies led by nominee directors, mostly uneducated individuals who signed documents without knowing their contents. Clients specified details in contracts, and nominee directors' information was forged. There's even a humorous tale of a Panamanian cookie factory registered under pop icon Michael Jackson. No real Michael Jackson involved, making investigations challenging. A typical nominee director signed 3 agreements, one not to demand anything from the real owner, another allowing the owner to remove them at any time, and a third, a pre-signed resignation letter with no date, letting the owner choose when to terminate. Nominee directors then opened bank accounts, signed annual meeting minutes, collected salaries, and eventually disappeared, sometimes to prison. The on-shell companies, Mossack Fonseca, offer fake email addresses for $100,000 a year, enabling clients to invent domain names harrypotter.com, donaldtrump.com, or tonystark.com, and conduct illicit activities under those identities. These companies could open bank accounts, invest, and perform transactions without scrutiny. Ordinary observers couldn't see what was happening, but investigative journalists could unravel it. Despite scrutiny, Mossack Fonseca claimed it broke no laws, blaming clients for misuse. However, it faced allegations of aiding entities under unsanctions, providing front companies for blacklisted firms, or facilitating transactions despite embargoes. The scandal ruined its reputation. Forcing closure in 2018 amid lawsuits, many politicians were exposed, some forced to resign. Pakistan's prime minister, Iceland's prime minister, and its finance minister. Others included former ex-prime minister David Cameron, Argentina's ex-president, and Russian filmmakers and musicians. Being named didn't guarantee criminal charges. Owning an offshore company isn't illegal, and proving laundering requires complex investigations, often thwarted by savvy lawyers. To this day, no one knows John Doe's true identity, understandably, given the enemies he exposed. releasing 11.5 million documents required organizational backing. Sean Doe likely represents that entity, similar to Mossack Fonseca's proxies. As speculated, the leak came from the US, China, or Russia world powers. The US, with CS global reach, is a candidate. Few US nationals appeared in the papers, suggesting an American leak. The UX close ties with the US and states like Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming acting as tax havens complicate matters, but I doubt it was the US. China is unlikely since the Panama Papers mention Xi Jinping's family extensively, and in China, a tiger doesn't eat its cubs. Finally, Russia seems plausible. Few Russian celebrities appeared, likely Putin's inner circle. Former Russian Finance Ministry advisor Andrei Gardin said the papers didn't trouble Putin but unsettled Europe. He suggested Russia might have held the data before leaking it to Germany's Subdish setting as a message to the US we know everything. And we can keep it hidden for you. Thus, the Panama Papers targeted the unnamed more than those revealed. The real scoop lay in hidden data, not the leaked names. No definitive conclusions exist, it remains speculation. A few years later, the Pandora Papers, around 12 or 13 million documents surfaced, but didn't shock people as much since the Panama Papers had already opened Pandora's box. It similarly exposed laundering, tax evasion, and tax havens, so I won't repeat details. In summary, the Panama Papers demonstrated how offshore companies hide assets and evade taxes, harming the global economy and eroding public trust. It struck a blow at jurisdictions once seen as safe havens, prompting reforms that temporarily removed some countries from the Financial Action Task Force gray list, a roster under FATF scrutiny for money laundering, tax abuse, or terrorist financing risks. Yet Panama remains on Europe's blacklist of tax havens. From this story, we see money laundering involves three stages. First is placement. Criminals choose where to deposit illicit funds through shell companies, relatives' names, or employees. Mistakes can alert authorities, but a robust network helps them clear this hurdle. Next is layering. They conduct numerous overlapping transactions, buying property, vehicles, gambling, and moving money offshore via trusts to obscure the trail and buy time for countermeasures. Finally comes integration. Once the storm subsides, they retrieve their dispersed assets for personal use. This process unfolds in secrecy, not with open displays of wealth. What consequences does laundering have for society? First, it impacts the economy by injecting unregulated cash, altering money supply, and triggering unpredictable market shocks like inflating real estate prices via property laundering. Next, it undermines financial stability when banks and institutions are used to launder money. It erodes public and investor confidence, risking crises. Finally, it creates unfair competition. A legal business with transparent costs and taxes can't compete with a launderer who ignores profit margins and undercuts prices, hurting legitimate workers. Laundering also fuels crime, drug trafficking, human smuggling, corruption, and erodes trust in finance and law, destabilizing societies and potentially isolating nations internationally. For example, Shepka's 2012 case accused of laundering billions from Mexican drug cartels and other illicit sources. The bank paid a $1.9 billion fine. More importantly, it sparked public outrage, damaged Shepka's profits and reputation, and strained Mexico's diplomatic ties with the US, which tightened anti-laundering measures on Mexico. Overall, money laundering is a pernicious crime with serious economic, social, and political effects. We've all got to do our part to fight it by staying broke so there's nothing to launder. Do you agree with me? Thank you for watching. This video was researched and compiled from multiple sources and personal experience, so if there are any errors, please comment below. I'm Israel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any videos. Goodbye and see you next time.